the business news stories you need to know about from right across the continent. But let's start with a run through the markets here for you. So the end of the first quarter had a pretty interesting performance mix to deal with. The NSE 20 marginal gain of just 1.124%. In contrast, though, your money would be much better off either in South Africa or in Egypt. The JSE up over 10.5% on the back of today's rise. The mining index 1.5% higher, hitting its highest level since 2011. The EGX 30 also posting some solid numbers in the first quarter. It's locked in a gain of over 16.5%. Here's what's coming up tonight. Nigeria unveils a tax amnesty program, but will defaulters bite? The EU set its eyes on a no-deal Brexit as the Prime Minister is struggling to break deadlock in Westminster. And we'll explore why the WTO is forecasting a slowdown in trade in 2019. All right then, our starting point tonight is Nigeria, where the federal government is granting amnesty to tax defaulters and providing a permanent waiver of criminal prosecution for tax evasion. Speaking at the unveiling ceremony of the Voluntary Offshore Assets Regularization Scheme, it's a bit of a mouthful that, the Attorney General said that the project is designed to allow immunity, shielding the owners from tax offences, penalties and interest concerning such declared offshore assets. The plan was initiated by the Swiss Consortium with a view to facilitate the regularization of offshore assets that are held by Nigerians. President Muhammadu Buhari signed an executive order in October last year to serve as a legal basis for the association to approach third-party holders of the fund with a view to assessing information on what assets they hold and where. All right, then, so let's bring you up to speed with this particular issue, the latest developments on this story. CGTN's Deji Badmus joins us now live from Lagos. Deji, let's pedal back a bit here. The 2017-2018 tax amnesty program raised barely $100 million. So why make this tax amnesty offer again, given that performance rate?
Well, first of all, Rambo, one thing you must understand is that this is a different scheme altogether. Of course, it's actually a mouthful, as you said. The Voluntary Offshore Assets Regularization Scheme is actually different from what was launched in 2017, which is VADES. That's a Voluntary Asset Income and Declaration Scheme. Now, this is basically targeted at offshore assets and the calculation of the government. According to the government now, it's actually the initiative of the Swiss Consortium, and the calculation is that you look at the humongous amount of assets owned by Nigerians offshore. So the government is targeting those assets, and that in this case, it just might be able to raise more than it has been able to raise now with the VADE scheme. So this is basically targeted at these offshore assets. Of course, these offshore assets are massive, lucrative, and somehow the government thinks it will be able to raise enough money, especially when you consider some of those beautiful conditions now that it has attached, some of the benefits now that those who have chosen to accept it would get. So that's basically it.
Indeed. So the Federal Inland Revenue Service at the exact same time, though, is saying that it aims to raise nearly $2.5 billion from tax defaulters between now and June. But what data sources is it using to track down defaulters, and how effective has the current approach been?
Now, Rama, one thing I know for sure that the FIRS has been doing is to track companies' account. They're tracking the bank accounts of companies across the country. I know for sure this. I'm very sure, because I've met quite a number of people whose company's account have actually been frozen, sort of, you know, they were prevented from making use of the accounts until they came forward now to regularize their tax problem. And I think it's been very effective, because quite a number of accounts, I can tell you, have actually been frozen, and people have been going forward to actually sort out these issues. So that is what, and you know, the reason why the FIRS now is able to do this is because of what is known as the biometric, you know, what we call the biometric number now, BVN for short, that every banker in this country, everybody who uses the bank is supposed to have. So With the BVN now, it's very easy to track your account, track company's account, and then look into those accounts, see what's in there, and then the tax official can actually come after you. And somehow I think it's proven to be effective because that's the reason why we've seen a slight adjustment now in the number of taxpayers in this country, Rahmah.
Indeed, and of course the target is a fairly large number, $2.5 billion. One last question for you. So data from the Inland Revenue Service indicating that the country has about 19 million registered taxpayers as of last year. But this is a country, the population close to 200 million people. That's barely 10% of the total population. Why isn't that registered figure of taxpayers much, much higher?
That's a good question, Rahmah, and the answer is pretty obvious. The fact is that people don't like paying taxes. As a matter of fact, the 19 million you talked about is actually an increment because less than 2 years ago, the number was actually less than that. I mean, we were told, for instance, by a former minister of Finance, just less than 2 years ago that only around 6 million people or thereabout actually pay tax in this country. At some point, we understand that number actually rose to 13 million, and today we're looking at 19 million. So it's an increase. It clearly shows that whatever the FIRS is doing, it's gradually working, even though the process is still slow. As we speak today, the estimate is that we should have close to 70 million taxable adults in this country, people who should be paying tax, who are working and should be paying tax. But the fact is that they are not paying. We have so many tax dodgers here. It's just the truth. And that is the reason why the government is coming up with different initiatives to get more people into the tax net. And it's one of the reasons why, for instance, a lot of people, businesses have actually come out to oppose the plan by the government to increase VAT tax. Now, people have said what the government needs to do is to increase that number from the 19 million it has, push it up to at least somewhere around 20 to 25 million. So the government is doing everything it can. That's the reason why we have the VAT scheme, is the reason why we have this new scheme now. And as we speak today, the tax authorities are sending people across this country. We see sometimes tax officials knocking on doors of companies. They're asking you, to bring out your tax clearance forms and all of that. And somehow I think they're making progress. But to be candid, the progress is very slow. 19 million, it's actually very poor. You're quite right. For a country of about 200 million people, where about 70 million people should be paying tax. But the government seems to be getting serious about it now, because the government wants to diversify this economy away from oil, and it is looking at doing that with tax. And that's why it's coming up with different ideas and different schemes to get more people now into the tax net, right?
Indeed, Nigerian tax policy is just a gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Deji Badmus, live in Lagos. Thank you very much. Let's move on now. A Sierra Leone investigation shows that around $1 billion in state expenditure simply cannot be accounted for. Now, the funds were spent somewhere between 2015 and 2018. President Julius Maada Bio commissioned the audit into public expenditure after his election last year. The funds are allegedly missing due to a combination of graft and mismanagement under the prior administration. In addition to chronic corruption, Sierra Leone's economy is also plagued by double-digit inflation and the legacy of a civil war. According to the International Monetary Fund, inflation was at 17.5% year-on-year in December. The consumer price growth probably will not get back to single digits, not before the year 2022. The African Development Bank today released its 2019 edition of its East Africa Regional Outlook, effectively announcing that the region will once again be driving the continent's economic growth this year, as it grows at the fastest rate of any other part of the continent. According to the bank, economic growth is forecast to remain strong at just under 6% in 2019 and 6.1% next year. The countries with the highest GDP growth forecasts: Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya and Djibouti. The service sector dominated the composition of GDP in the region, averaging about 59%, followed by agriculture at 25.7%, Industry, which includes construction, was pretty tiny at about 15%. Similarly, manufactured exports stood at an average of 14.6%, indicating the absence of structural transformation taking place in the continent. The bank also highlighted a range of downside risks that could undermine economic growth and development. Topping that list, agriculture's vulnerability to climate change, a heavy reliance on primary commodity exports, think of tea and coffee, and in oil importing countries, a rise in oil prices. We'll talk about that later in the bulletin. More recent and growing concerns are persistent current account deficits and related increases in external debt. This year, the African Development Bank also chose to focus on the continent's progress in regional integration.
Landmark peace and friendship agreements between Ethiopia and Eritrea in 2018, and Eritrea's agreement to establish diplomatic ties with Somalia and Djibouti are shaping regional integration in the Horn of Africa, as Ethiopia now has access to Eritrea's ports, which have diversified the country's access route to the sea and beyond. Of course, more work is needed to improve the trade and transport corridors, but the aforementioned developments, coupled with full implementation of signed integration initiatives, most notably the CFTA, will drive this needed improvements.
Away from East Africa, let's head a bit to the continent's most industrialized economy, South Africa. The Gauteng province has unveiled a new $2.8 billion rolling stock manufacturing facility. It will manufacture, assemble and service locomotives and other rolling stock for the African continent and contribute to the skills and small business development in rail manufacturing and services. With the details, here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela.
South Africa's manufacturing industry has been given a boost by the launch of this locomotive plant. It is as a result of an investment by TMH Africa, a subsidiary of Russian rolling stock manufacturing giant Transmesh Holding. The new investment is modeled on South Africa's Gautrain. Gautrain is a mass rapid transit railway system which was constructed in an effort to address the heavy traffic problem in and around Johannesburg and Pretoria in Gauteng.
The new public transport system will just be like the Gautrain by standard and look and feel and efficiency. The Gautrain is not about separating classes. It was a demonstration that we can build a speed train in Africa that works.
An added advantage will be upskilling of the workforce. The investment will go a long way in helping with the dilapidated rail infrastructure in this country. It's also a source of employment for thousands of people. This is also seen as a response to the call by President Cyril Ramaphosa for more investment in this country.
In addition to retaining jobs and growing jobs, increasing the number of jobs, we also look at how we can support the businesses where they are located, the infrastructure, the roads. Everywhere I go, the people of South Africa, the people of this province say jobs, 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 jobs.
Makura says South Africa's government is always cognizant of the fact that South Africa has a role to play in attracting investment opportunities not only for this country, but for the rest of the continent.
Part of our strategy is to help take Gauteng-based businesses into Africa. We call it Gauteng has a role to industrialize Africa. Re-industrialize South Africa, but to industrialize Africa. So even with that, it's a very good thing.
It is expected that this plant will bring innovation and efficiency in the local manufacturing industry. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Benoni, South Africa.
On to Tanzania now. The newly appointed Vodacom Tanzania Managing Director Hisham Hendi and several staff have been arrested over alleged fraudulent use of network facilities. According to Vodacom, no formal charges have been preferred against the employees so far. In June 2018, two CEOs of Halotel Tanzania and Zanzibar Telecom Company were also charged with fraud as part of a crackdown against tax evasion. This was set to cause government losses of more than $500,000. The offences in this instance include the use of unregistered SIM cards, operating without a license, illegally importing and installing communications equipment, and fraudulent use, as far as the government is concerned, of telecommunication networks. All right then, company headlines. Let's start in the oil sector. Royal Dutch Shell says its subsidiaries in Nigeria paid over $6.3 billion to the Nigerian government in 2018 compared to $4.3 billion the year before and $3.6 billion in 2016. Now, the firm disclosed this in its 2018 Payments to Governments report, which was released just this week. That record shows that Nigeria's revenue from Shell was the highest out of the 34 countries to which it made payments last year. Over in East Africa, Kenya's budget carrier Jambojet says it will be leasing 4 more planes this year as it seeks to boost its fleet in readiness for the rollout of new routes. The airline is building on its success in Uganda, where it launched a daily service last year to expand to other regional countries as well. It seeks to engage the individual governments to seek approval to operate in the countries as they plan to embark on these new destinations. Further afield, the US pharmacy chain Boots is warning of possible store closures in the UK as it tries to cut operational costs in efforts to restructure. The move comes after the firm announced that it had suffered the most difficult quarter, with sales growth falling below 2.3%. The chain has some 2,485 stores across the UK. It employs about 56,000 people. According to the company, the store portfolio review is underway across its entire operations. And finally, the US cross-platform messaging app WhatsApp has launched a fact-checking service in India, where users can send in messages, photos and videos that they want verified. It's called a checkpoint tip line, and it's meant to counter fake news and misinformation ahead of India's general election. Now, the feature will be available in a range of languages, English and 4 Indian languages, Hindi, Telugu, Bengali and Malayalam. That's a run through your company headlines. Right then, we're 15 minutes into the hour. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. The EU is making plans to deal with a no-deal Brexit as the Prime Minister is struggling to break the deadlock in Westminster. And the BRICS Business Council is looking for consensus to rope in Africa into trade opportunities within the bloc.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Central Nigeria. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's get you an update now on deadlock in the UK. The European Union's main economics and tax official, Pierre Moscovici, says that the risk of a no-deal Brexit on the 12th of April is going up. He made those statements as he explained the bloc's contingency plans for customs checks. Now, he added that EU companies that trade with the UK have to be ready for additional costs and bureaucracy, not to mention delays, and an increase in customs checks, while travellers and their luggage will also be subject to a lot more checks than they are at the moment. On the most sensitive of issues, that of the Irish border, Moscovici did not give a clear answer, however.
In case of an exit of the Union without an agreement, the United Kingdom will become a third party overnight. It will be a legal change by design, instantaneous, radical, obviously very substantial for the United Kingdom, our member states and our companies. The Commission is ready to take every legal and operational consequence of a no-deal exit, and actually we have been preparing this for 2 years now.
April 12th is, however, the ultimate possible deadline for approval. If the House of Commons does not express itself by this date, no further short extension will be possible. After April 12th, we would risk putting in jeopardy the good running of the European Parliament elections and threaten the good functioning of the European Union. The measures that we have taken are time-limited and unilateral. They will protect the key interests of the European Union at least until the end of the year. But disruption will obviously be inevitable for citizens, for businesses and for almost every sector. The United Kingdom will be affected more than the European Union because there is no such thing as managed or negotiated no deal, and there is no such thing as a no-deal transition.
Right, and so deadlock has been the name of the game in the final run into Brexit, if you will. Will the PM's latest gambit change anything at all? Let's find out. Richard Bestick joins us now live from London. So then, Richard, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, he says he welcomes the latest overtures from the Prime Minister. But is there anything at all that these two individuals agree on?
Well, Rahmah, I suppose you could argue that they are agreed on the broad principles of Brexit, in so much as at the last general election here in 2017, both parties put into their manifestos that they both wish to leave the European Union. And beyond that, it's pretty much falls into disarray between the two sides. The Labour Party has drawn up 6 principles which are designed to really get in the way of any plans that the British government might put forward. They were drawn up in the days of the bravado of Brexiteers and really quote back to them the claims they made, including that Britain would leave the European Union and enjoy all the benefits of membership without being a member. Well, that's clearly proved to be wrong. And the Prime Minister over the last 2.5 years has drawn up a number of red lines which have boxed her in and put the two sides at daggers drawn. So we have a situation now where there is a long way to go between to bring them together, and these talks are attempting to do that, but they won't be easy, and there are warnings all round that Jeremy Corbyn could be given a poison chalice if he's brought in to condone this government's Brexit plans.
Indeed. So let's talk about some of those red lines in a bit more detail. Labour MPs voted as being in favour of a customs union with the EU post-Brexit, but the Prime Minister has been very critical of this idea because, in her words, she says it would leave the UK rather, half in and half out. But now that she's reached across the aisle, can she concede that point in talks with Labour?
Well, we're very much in the realm of political tone of the vocabulary here. The Labour Party, as you say, is in favour of a close alignment with the European Union, the EU marketplace, and that includes a long-term membership of the customs union. The customs union is basically free trade between members of it. Britain is a member of the customs union as part of its EU membership. Once it leaves, there's no necessity for it to be in that, and the Labour Party is arguing that it wants to continue that. It is very much a red line. Now, if Theresa May concedes that, she risks tearing her political party in Parliament and in the country asunder, because there will be a good deal of resistance. You made the point there that it's half in, half out. The former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson put it a little bit stronger when he said that Brexit is getting so soft it's in danger of falling apart. So yes, she might be able to compromise, although Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish nationalist First Secretary in Scotland, says that she can see no areas, after her talks earlier this afternoon, she can see no areas where Prime Minister Theresa May is actually moving towards compromise. But the risks of accepting customs union from Labour would be great indeed politically.
Indeed. So the Prime Minister, again, back to something that she points out repeatedly as a red line. She says that the withdrawal agreement still has to be approved by the House of Commons. But this is a deal that legislators have kicked out several times. Is there anything at all that can be done now to make it even more palatable?
Well, that's what these talks are all about, trying to find some kind of areas of compromise. The withdrawal agreement is locked. That is, Brussels have said that they're not going to negotiate that again. So that's locked. That stays. But there is the political agreement that runs parallel to it, 15 pages or so, alongside the 500 pages of the withdrawal agreement. There you can make additions, and Brussels would be happy to make those additions. The problem is, it's not a binding document, so whatever comes up can be changed by a new leader in number 10, or indeed by a change of heart on the part of the government. It contains its own risks, Rahmah.
Indeed. One last question for you, Richard. So legislators have voted again and again against a no-deal Brexit, just crashing out of the EU. But at this point, there's no agreement on what MPs actually do want in Westminster. Given that contradiction, aren't we just getting closer and closer to a no-deal Brexit?
Yeah, we are, exactly. And you heard earlier the risks of a no-deal Brexit. So what's going on in parallel to all these negotiations seeking out some kind of compromise is a move by members of Parliament to draw up legislation which will legally, enshrined in law, stop the Prime Minister from crashing out without any agreement. Of course, the default position is if you don't have an agreement and they run past that deadline of the 12th, then they are in deep trouble. The Prime Minister now seeking an extension till the 22nd. But it's quite possible the Brussels might turn around and say to her, well, we would prefer it a much longer extension. The UK Prime Minister is trying to avoid Britain going into the European Union elections, putting up people to stand as members of the European Parliament. She wants to avoid that because of the clear contradictions and ironies contained in it. But you can see the difficulties that exist.
Indeed, and there are many, many difficulties ahead. Thank you for keeping us abreast with the latest. That's Richard Bestick there live, of course, in London. Now then, back to the continent. The South African chapter of the BRICS Business Council is currently hosting the group's mid-term meeting in Johannesburg. Now that meeting also marks the handing over of the rotating chair of this council over to Brazil. CGTN's Angela Coppola was there.
300 delegates from 5 countries that make up the BRICS are in Johannesburg looking for business opportunities, and some are seeking business partners. They're workshopping the group's 2019 theme, which is focused on the African continent and the fourth industrial revolution, and it's split into 9 streams.
We have solid ideas and interesting concept papers. The only thing we need now is to bring consensus and execution mechanism on these ideas. The level of interaction and deliberations that we have seen on some of the proposals like the BRICS rating agency have been highly intense, which is indeed good as it shows the level of interest and keenness amongst the members to table a strong, concrete deliverable.
I personally, because of where I come from, am interested in the financial services working group outcomes. There's a lot of interaction, a lot of discussions, proposals that are being discussed and that have actually carried over from last year's sessions.
While South Africa is a member of BRICS, African businesses need to benefit from the BRICS opportunities. An example is the auto sector.
Why can't the nuts and bolts be done in maybe in Angola, and then the seeds in Ethiopia? Because Ethiopia is the leading manufacturer of many products, especially seeds with leather. And then why can't we then let the rubber be taken from DRC, and then we do the tires? So I'm saying this is how we can build beneficiation centers in the rest of Africa.
The grouping has faced several challenges. These relate to the different levels of economic and sectoral development.
There are times when we need to just walk a little bit slower than some of our counterparts would like to, in order to make sure that the agreements that we reach benefit everybody and have the complementary impact for all of us. So I suspect that we may find some impatience on some aspects.
Expectations are high that there will be some signed deals in the different work streams that have been working together for the past 12 months. But it's all about beneficiation and creating those value chains on the African continent. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Chinese car maker Geely is the 13th car manufacturer in the world. The Chinese firm has developed a new partnership now with the Tunisian entity to produce and distribute over 2,500 Chinese cars in the first phase of the project. With the details, here's CGTN's Adnan Chouachi.
Chinese car manufacturer Geely has inaugurated its first assembly unit in the coastal city of Sousse in partnership with the Tunisian company Medicars, a subsidiary of the Tunisian Economic and Industrial Group, Zweri.
Our partnership with Geely started in 2017. It is a tripartite partnership between Medicars, Geely and Sotudes, which is in charge of commercialization and distribution.
The unit is worth a total investment of about $7.44 million, including about $330,000 dedicated to equipment and about $6.61 million to the logistical platform of delivery and repair.
In 2017, we hosted the technical team from Geely for the validation of the assembly line process. The production started in December of 2018. This assembly line can produce 2,750 vehicles per year and per shift. This production capacity can be tripled in 3 shifts according to the market and demand.
The Minister of Investment said the government is encouraging foreign investments to boost the economy in the country.
Tunisia aims to increase its competitiveness and attractiveness as a foreign investment destination. The partnership with the Chinese car manufacturer Geely is a step forward in the development of the car industry in Tunisia. It reinforces Tunisian-Chinese economic ties.
Tunisian authorities assert that the cooperation with the Chinese side will help create know-how and improve the skills of the Tunisian workforce and possibly a real industrial production platform in the future to export Chinese cars to the whole African continent. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
You're watching Global Business Africa. It's time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. The WTO is forecasting a slowdown in global trade in 2019. And the plot thickens in Nissan as a former CEO threatens to spill the beans. Which ones? We'll find out shortly.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For a look at some economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's run through the stories making your headlines at this hour, starting in South Africa. The situation is tense in Alexandra Township. Of course, that's part of Johannesburg. Residents blocked exit and entry points to the northern Joburg Township. They're protesting against poor service delivery by the state. It's one of the oldest settlements in Johannesburg. It's characterized by high levels of unemployment and crime as well. Over in North Africa, the caretaker government in Algeria is facing the possibility of having to deal with unrelenting demands from protesters. This comes in the wake of the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, whose tail end of 20 years in power was marked by weeks of mass protests against his rule. Bouteflika submitted his resignation with immediate effect on Tuesday. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, is heading to the United States to discuss ways of strengthening security and economic ties. It's his first trip out of Africa since his inauguration in January. While in the US, he's scheduled to meet the Secretary of State and other senior officials to discuss trade and other bilateral matters. And a preliminary report of the crashed Ethiopian Airlines flight ET302 is still being awaited. But according to Reuters news agency sources, pilots did follow procedures laid out by Boeing, the plane maker. According to those sources, Boeing's anti-stall software, MCAS, repeatedly forced down the nose of the jet. Pilots then allegedly turned it off in accordance with Boeing's procedures. That's the run through your headlines. On to trade matters now. The World Trade Organization has lowered its forecast for global growth this year from 3.7% down to just 2.6%. It's the second consecutive year that the WTO has actually cut expectations. Wang Chongshan has more.
Tariff wars will hammer global trade this year.
To the extent that we see global economic growth slowing down, everybody loses.
WTO slashes its growth projection for 2019 to the lowest level in 3 years, down to just 2.6% from its earlier estimates of 3.7%.
Over the last year, we have seen a range of new tariffs put in place, affecting widely traded goods. Trade simply cannot play its full role in driving GDP growth when levels of uncertainty are so high. Greater uncertainty means definitely lower investment and consumption.
The updated forecast reflects similar scaled-down readings from the World Bank and International Monetary Fund.
The expected rebound in global growth later this year and into early 2020 is precarious. Why is that? Because it is vulnerable to downside risks, including country-related uncertainties, such as Brexit, for instance, and broader uncertainties such as high debt in some sectors, in some countries, tensions around trade policy, still uncertain, and a sense of unease in financial markets.
The WTO report also says although the volume of global trade grows slowly in 2018, the dollar value rose 10%. Strong import growth in Asia contributed to an increase in the commercial services trade sector, which grew by 8%. Goods trade volumes are expected to grow more strongly in developing economies this year, with 3.4% growth in exports compared with 2.1% in developed economies. It also said trade growth could rebound slightly to 3% in 2020 if trade tensions ease.
The last time we had a number that low was in March 2010. So we are not in good shape at this point in time. If trade tensions continue to increase, we could see an even more significant dampening effect on the global economy and trade expansion. So let's all work to avoid that.
CGTN.
Prosecutors in Tokyo, in the meantime, are considering pressing fresh charges against Carlos Ghosn. This comes as the former Nissan CEO announced on Twitter that he would be giving his side of the story. A verified Twitter account in Ghosn's name said, quote, "I'm getting ready to tell the truth about what is happening." Press conference on Thursday, April the 11th. End of quote. And that tweet was sent early on Wednesday afternoon. In the latest twist, though, in a roller coaster of a case, Japanese investigators are reportedly eyeing a possible aggravated breach of trust charge related to at least $32 million in Nissan funds or transferred to a distributor in Oman. Some of that money is believed to have been used to buy a luxury boat that was allegedly used by Mr. Ghosn and his family. NASA, in the meantime, isn't particularly happy about India's destruction of a satellite in orbit. Last week, India's space agency carried out a successful test of an anti-satellite weapon. But NASA says that debris from the mission Shakti, as it was called, could threaten the International Space Station. Here's CGTN's Giles Gibson with more.
This simulation shows how India's anti-satellite technology locks onto a target and then destroys it. NASA says it's identified 400 pieces of orbital debris from India's recent test. It's tracking 60 pieces that are 10 centimeters or more in diameter.
Of those 60, we know that 24 of them are going above the apogee of the International Space Station. That is a terrible, terrible thing to create an event that sends debris in an apogee that goes above the International Space Station. And that kind of activity is not compatible with the future of human spaceflight that we need to see have happen.
We are expecting contact.
NASA says the chance of the ISS colliding with debris has risen by 44% over 10 days. Officials say they can maneuver the space station if they need to. India's space agency, though, insists that it carried out its test in a low Earth orbit, far from the ISS and other satellites. And India's Prime Minister says that his country is not becoming an aggressor in space.
I want to assure the global community that this new ability that we have achieved is not against anyone. It is a defensive initiative of a fast-moving India.
As the extraterrestrial disputes between Washington and New Delhi intensifies, the Trump administration is moving forward with plans for a U.S. Space Force. The White House says the new branch of the military will help defend vital national interests in space. But this controversy shows that the competition between the world's great powers has already launched into space. Giles Gibson, CGTN, Washington.
Now, China's digital economy promised you a much broader, much wider array of products and a lot more interesting quality. With the nation's digital economy expected to grow by 15% this year, your shopping experiences will continue to change, but challenges, of course, will arise. CGTN's Liu Yang shows us what's in store.
It promises fresh, high-quality products from both domestic and overseas markets and a very strict quality control system based on big data and technology. This fresh salmon going from Norway to the store only took 72 hours to arrive, and it could be on your dinner table the next minute if you time things right. Much of the seafood I ordered online was frozen, but these look fresh. It's easy to cook when I get back home. Cross-border e-commerce makes products flow with guaranteed quality and timing. The store was defined as a pathfinder of Alibaba's new retail through technology and data in a bid to merge online and offline retail. Research has found that as China's middle-class population continues to rise, so does the number of those using cross-border e-commerce. The post-1990 and post-95 generations who grew up with the internet have gradually become the main customers.
Fresh Shippo, or Hema Shunsheng, is a digital enterprise from procurement to distribution to sales to returns. We are operating based on digitization. In the future, based on the same business model, we need to bring more regional characteristics to it.
By 2017, Chinese shopping site Tmall had 10 times as many international consumers as it did 3 years prior, and the numbers are still growing. According to the World Economic Forum, China now accounts for 42% of all global e-commerce, boasting 1/3 of the world's most successful tech startups and conducting 11 times more mobile payments than the United States per year.
The future of international trade is a digital trade. Through digital management, we realize the logistics, brands, and marketing of digital operations to reduce costs and improve efficiency.
Experts say digital trade and cross-border business offers even more opportunities for foreign brands and small and medium-sized enterprises. But some say it's actually the credit information and the trading records online that bring business opportunities to SMEs. In 2018, China became the world's second largest digital economy behind the U.S. Experts say by 2025, with the continuous expansion of the digital economy, national digital literacy will have reached the average level of developed countries. And the digital economy is reshaping China's employment landscape and creating new business models such as sharing economy and mobile payment. Experts say over 90% of enterprises are earning more profit after utilizing digital technology, yet large variations remain at different sectors' digitalization levels in China. Therefore, protecting property rights and ensuring efficient markets remain high priorities for the future. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
5 years ago, it was pretty rare for Nigerians to go online in order to look for a place to live. But a surge in the number of people finding their homes this way has created a new breed of property-focused tech firms. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with the details on what's hot tonight.
Nigerians searching for their dream home to buy or rent are turning to the internet in droves. This has led to a surge in the number of property-focused technology firms. The emergence of these prop-tech companies is due to the country's rapid population growth, faster broadband speed, and cheaper smartphones.
You just come down here to the search property. You insert the location you're looking at anywhere in Nigeria. All the properties here are listed with images. You come down there, you click on the property page. That property page shows you all the features of that house. Call the agent directly from the app, or you can actually WhatsApp the agent directly. So whichever one you want is fine.
These factors have also benefited other sectors from retail to gambling in the last few years. Ogundipe's website now receives around 500,000 hits each month, compared with 15,000 a month back in 2013. Around 90% of that traffic is coming from mobile phones. Nigeria has the highest number of internet users in Africa, with approximately 107 million internet data subscribers. The country's prop-tech companies have adopted a subscription model, charging property agents a listing fee and property developers a commission once a transaction is completed. But there are risks attached to the convenience of online listings in Nigeria's largely unregulated property market.
The major challenge that they are facing is really in access to actual properties that have been provided by the actual property owners. Some people find out that their properties have been listed on platforms and they don't know how that happened. And then again, we also find out that even for properties that have been instructed to actually dispose by the owners, have myriads of agents that are marketing this property. So while some landowners or property owners may think the more the better, it actually has its own problem for the person who is actually looking to acquire this property.
Sadiq's company developed a vetting system on his platform to combat false advertising and the double listing problems. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. We mentioned oil as a key risk a little early in the bulletin. Here's how. Brent crude does continue to flirt at that $70 a barrel level, even at 69.71, where it was a little earlier today. 69.86 is the highest we've seen so far. Brent has posted gains of over 29.5% so far in the year. Last time we were here, it was November 2018. Pretty much like then, it's supply concerns that are driving prices higher and higher. According to Bloomberg data, this is the biggest quarterly gain for crude in nearly a decade. Here's what's coming up next. We've heard about prop tech, but how about agri-tech? We'll explore that in Nigeria when we come back.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Let's focus on an agri-tech startup in Nigeria. It's trying to change that country's agricultural sector in a rather unique way. Farm Crowdy, as the app is known, basically connects small-scale farmers with investors. So these investors put cash in farm cycles that range from anywhere from 3 months to 1 year in exchange for a profitable return on their investment. With the details, here's CGTN's Deji Badmus.
Want to own a farm in Nigeria? Here is the young man you should be talking with. Onyeka Kuma is the main brain behind the innovative digital agri-tech startup, Farm Crowdy, an initiative that is completely changing the face of what is considered the oldest industry in the world, agriculture. Through Farm Crowdy's website and mobile app, small-scale farmers are connected with sponsors who are willing to invest on the farms for profit. It's just as easy as the touch of a button.
I discovered that farmers had peculiar problems, problems like access to funding, problems like technical know-how, problems like where do they sell what they've produced. On the other hand, you had so many people that wanted to invest in these farmers, but do you know how? The farmers to trust them, the farmers to put their money in and they'll get a return after harvest. So I was in that position, and then I discovered with so many people looking at connecting with these farmers, we could build a platform that will allow the farmers now provide their farms through our platform to these individuals so that they can now sponsor farms on our platform. And then we get the monies, we get the right inputs, we provide technical knowledge, we provide a market for the farmers to sell, and at the end of the season, everybody gets a share of the profit.
The initiative is expanding rapidly. From just one farmer when Farm Crowdy launched in late 2017, it now has around 11,000 farmers across 13 states of the country. And guess what? All the farms are usually sold out as soon as they are put up on Farm Crowdy's website and mobile application. Just take a look at this. All the farms currently displayed on the website of Farm Crowdy are sold out at the moment. None is available for sponsorship. It's just a measure of how popular this initiative is becoming.
There are going to be more farms coming up on the platform. And one of the ways we've gone around it is also getting people the opportunity to sponsor not just the production, but also the trading.
And it's not just farmers and sponsors who have been attracted to Farm Crowdy. Investors too have been buying into the initiative as well. Onyeka and his co-founders started out on their own personal funds, but 4 months after they launched, investors began showing interest.
Today we've raised over $2.4 million in investments into the business called Farm Crowdy. So this is equity investors. These are investors that are investing for impact, and that has allowed us to employ the right people. That has allowed us to continue to scale the business.
Farm Crowdy has so far helped in rearing close to 2 million broiler birds as part of its poultry farm cycles and cultivated over 16,000 acres of farmland with over 35,000 farm units sold to date.
We gave ourselves a 5-year goal to work with 50,000 farmers in the next 3 years from now. We still want to do this, but beyond that is have an impact on the lives of over 1 million farmers, directly or indirectly. To also the Nigerian youths that get involved, that want to get involved in agriculture, the big goal is to be that platform they look at and they are excited about becoming farmers.
This crop of young adults at Farm Crowdy are helping in their own small way to boost food security in Nigeria. With time, they say they hope to take their initiative across the continent. Deji Badmore, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Authentic tourism is becoming popular once again. Now, while travelers obviously want to see the most famous parts of any country or city when they arrive, they're also wanting something real, a real authentic experience. A group of young Cape Townians decided to tap into that very need, giving tourists an opportunity to have a traditional meal. Dine with Hailisha is a pop-up experience where tourists are offered the opportunity to have lunch or dinner with a South African family in their home. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu went along to Soweto in Johannesburg for lunch.
When Lutando Diasi and his buddies decided to ask their mothers to make meals for their visiting friends from overseas, they had no idea this would be the beginning of a flourishing community project.
So from there we saw the opportunity and the impact it brought to our community, and we're like, okay, we have to do something about this. We have to scale it so it can also benefit other communities, other households, and other individuals, financially wise and also experience wise.
Tourists do pay for their meals and drinks, but it's a win-win situation. Visitors get to enjoy an authentic experience, while homeowners, especially in the townships, get to generate an income.
We sign up hosts, via our Facebook page now, and also our emails. They directly contact us and we keep in touch with them. And when we're hosting the dinners, we invite them to one of the dinners so they can come and experience it. Then from there, we visit them into their households, and that's where we sign them up, officially.
It's exposed me to other people, like the guests that we had here. So other people know that I cater and I cook as well. And also changing of contacts with other people. Say they need catering at a specific time or having a certain event. I can get calls, and also the sharing conversations that we were having, they were also mind-opening. Like the way that they spoke, it teaches you not to think just for here.
Dine With's popularity has grown since 2015. Over 200 dinners and lunches are being hosted in Khayelitsha and in Johannesburg every month. The Dutch love the concept and are now partnering with Dine With.
It's a great experience. I was participating in a dinner in Khayelitsha in December, and I was so enthusiastic about the formula that I thought, well, we have to do this also here in Soweto. Of course, we think that economic growth and creation of jobs is very important. Basically, we try to promote investments in South Africa by Dutch companies.
For me, it was a great experience to stay here with you in Soweto, because like a Brazilian woman, it's not easily stay inside a township. So for me, it was amazing. I love it.
I always thought his concept was fascinating. It's impossible to go to two separate Dine With experiences and get the exact same conversation.
Lutando and his team now have their sights set on scaling Dine With to other townships in South Africa and the rest of the continent. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Soweto, South Africa.
Right, then a quick run through the currencies here for you. We're seeing a bit of a weakness creeping back into the dollar-shilling rate, 100.75 being the relevant number that we're looking at the moment. A fair bit of PMI data also coming up today. PMI reading in South Africa contracting sharply in March, down about 50 points, from 50.2 down into 48.8. A rise in power cuts being cited as a drag on output by companies. Kenya's PMI reading for March also not a source of much cheer either, down to 51 points. It's the weakest reading we've seen in 16 months. In Kenya's case, weaker agricultural output was cited as a key reason. Those are your currencies, and that's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Rahmah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.